Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Peach Pundit Podcast. Jason Pye, joined by Scott Turner and Buzz Brockway, or Boston Rockway, as he is sometimes known.
We'll see who appears tonight.
I am curious to see who appears, especially given our first topic. A lot of heated debate in the United States Senate today. The Senate has been debating both the election voting rights, whatever you want to call it, legislation. Should be voting actually right now on the cloture motion to concur in the House amendment to H.R. 5746, which is the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act, which is basically sort of an amalgamation of two different pieces of legislation that have been kind of put together. And with that has come this vigorous debate on the filibuster and the future of the filibuster, which Democrats do not have the votes to change because of Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, who frankly speaking are kind of heroes in this. And I'm not, I say that as someone who understands. I have bills that are stalled because they don't have 60 votes right now. So, and, it's just the nature of life in the Senate, and it always has been for a long time. But today, while watching the debate on the filibuster, because I'm fascinated by congressional procedure, and it seems like I learn something new every day. Georgia was mentioned quite a bit.
Why?
It just was because Georgia is the poster child for these bills in the states. SB 202 being the bill passed in Georgia. President Biden called it a new era of Jim Crow. There are different aspects of Georgia's law that have been brought up. Things, everything from like
we lost Jason.
Yes, right in mid as he was making a brilliant point.
He was right. Hey man, he was on a roll too, boy. He was on a roll.
Okay,
if you're watching,
there he is.
There he is. He is.
Hold on, what network am I connected to?
Don't tell me you did the same thing again.
No, this wasn't a network problem before. It was just Zoom being stupid.
Well, no, last week you had this problem where.
No, I didn't. I'm gonna have to take all this out. We've had internet connectivity problems all day today, and I thought they were ironed out, but apparently not so.
Thanks a lot, Biden.
I don't even know where
America right there. See, Biden's America. Peach Pundit watchers.
I might just leave all this in now. I don't know. So the issue. So basically, where Georgia was mentioned, the criminalization of giving water or food to people who are waiting in lines. Things that was prominently mentioned. Sure. Different aspects of it was mentioned. It was interesting to watch Senator Tim Scott, who's from South Carolina, give a vigorous defense of Georgia's voter law or voting law. It was a pretty interesting debate to watch. But yeah, and this whole thing looks like it's about to fail. I'm curious what you guys, what the reception has been inside the Georgia General Assembly to this debate in Congress on voting rights.
I think the average Republican member of the General Assembly feels like the president, Vice President Stacey Abrams have told a pack of lies about what SB 202 does. And in comparison to other states, it is not a restrictive voting law at all. As a matter of fact, sort of a novel approach. Wes Cantrell, our friend who was on the podcast middle of last year, has been kicking around the idea for quite some time, actually, of dropping a bill to make Georgia's election law identical to Delaware. And if he did that, then we would lose a whole host of our early voting days. You would have to have an excuse for sickness or travel in order to vote absentee. The days of no excuse absentee balloting would be gone. There would be no drop boxes. There are a whole host, and you would have to show photo ID in order to vote. So there's a whole bunch of things that Georgia gets labeled as being a restrictive state when it comes to voting. But when you compare it to the president and his home state, we're like the nirvana of voting and ballot access.
Yeah. I think, I can't remember if I mentioned this last week, but Yuval Levin at AEI had a really interesting article basically saying both parties are wrong. Both parties are trying to undermine faith in the election, and we all know how Republicans are doing it through Donald Trump. It's not through passing these bills, but Democrats with these constant, this trying to paint this picture that democracy hangs in the balance here if they can't get this bill that no Republican is willing to vote for, and even some Democrats have heartburn about, that if they can't pass these bills, then we I don't know, we slipped into some sort of anarcho fascist state or something, and it's preposterous. It's way over the top, and I struggle to see what the political benefit they think they're going to derive from this, other than I guess showing their the progressive part of their base that they've done everything possible they can do. But yeah, it is just it's gonna end in failure again.
One of the things that was a frequent talking point today was the election board takeover of Fulton County, and that's one of the things. It's like I realize that sounds bad, but do you realize how badly Fulton County elections are administered?
Yeah.
Whenever Georgia gets a black eye for the performance of our elections, it's Fulton and DeKalb County over and over and over again.
Yep.
If there's any, when you hear about long lines, you're not hearing about that in Cherokee County. You're not hearing about that in Gwinnett County, which is one of the most populous counties in the state.
Right.
You're hearing it about the same places over and over again. So the legislature had to do something to try to make it so that people who are voting in Fulton County could actually get into the poll and cast their ballot in a timely manner, not spend 5-6 hours in line.
And we should point out, for those who might not know, those are two of the largest Democratic counties in the state of Georgia, two of the most heavily, they voted for Biden overwhelmingly.
Yes. But contrast that, one of the, along with the false narratives, right? So CNN has jumped on this story about Lincoln. Can I go ahead and talk about Lincoln, Jason?
In just a moment, but there's a couple of things, because I spoke, I gave a talk about advocacy this weekend at the Libertarian Party of Georgia's convention, and one of the things that came up was this push for election reform or voting reform or voting rights at the in Congress, and I said, look, there are a couple of things about this bill. One, people keep talking about January 6th. This does nothing to address what happened on January 6th or the counting of the Electoral College. If you want to directly address January 6th, you actually have to reform the Electoral Count Act. And so that's issue number one. Issue number two, it extends beyond simply voting to things like donor disclosure. Which is directly aimed at at pressuring people not to give money to groups that are ideologically out of sync with who may be in power. And given this in this age of cancel culture, it's that's a big problem. I was telling a friend of mine last night, I personally support same-sex marriage. Personally, but I have no problem with someone who wants to give money to an organization like the National Organization of Marriage, which and their donors have been leaked before, and that was designed to pressure them to stop giving money to this organization. And then not the counterpoint, but the other side of the argument is conservatives are way off base when they say, well, this is a federal takeover of elections. Well, Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution does give Congress the right to regulate in federal elections.
But should they is a different question altogether.
I don't disagree with you.
And what form those regulations should take.
Right. I'm simply saying that argument, should they, is an entirely different question than can they. Yes, they can, but they should not. Right. And so I'll repeat here. I think SB 202, because of where it came from, was largely a bad idea. There's some things in the law I don't like. That said, this stuff happening in Congress right now is a load of crap.
Yeah.
Amen.
But Scott, I will let you take over.
Well, there's just so much misinformation, and it seems like every time something happens in Georgia, CNN and the mainstream media, they want to jump on it and say, see, here's an example of how Republicans are shutting down minority voters and trying to suppress the vote. And they had a story that was on their website today about how Lincoln County, Georgia is ground zero for their for the election suppression effort, and that has been enabled by SB 202. And essentially what is happening in Lincoln County is they are consolidating their voting precincts. They're going from 7 down to 1 for on election day voting. And now just hear me out, 7 total throughout the county. They're bringing it down to 1. And that has made news like, oh, look at this. They're suppressing Democrat and minority voters is essentially the lead that they're trying to push. But let's look at Lincoln County. Okay, let me go and look at Lincoln County. The last statewide election was the runoff between Raphael Warnock and Kelly Loeffler and John Ossoff and David Perdue. I'm going to use the Warnock and Loeffler race because there were a few more votes cast in that race statewide. That's the reason why I picked it. But in that race, Raphael Warnock brought in 31.21% of the vote. So this is a very heavily favored Republican county. Kelly Loeffler brought in 68.79% of the vote. But what is that vote total, right? Out of the millions of people who voted in Georgia, 2,903 people voted for Kelly Loeffler, and that was almost 69% of the vote. And Warnock got 1,317 votes, 31% of the vote. We're talking about the total number of registered voters in Lincoln County is 6,223. The county is 68% white and 29% black, and then a very small number of each other minorities scattered throughout, according to the Census Bureau. So this is not an effort to suppress Democrat voters. This is an effort by a county to make local decisions about what's most efficient for them. And here's the other thing too, right? I want to throw some more numbers, and I'm sorry if it's boring, but this is important, right? Election day vote for Raphael Warnock was 21% of his total vote, his vote total. So on election day against Kelly Loeffler, he got 281 votes. And Kelly Loeffler got 1,139. So she got 39% of her vote total came on election day, 21% for Warnock, which means that the rest of the votes were either cast by mail or absentee in advance. And when you vote absentee in advance in these small counties, you're going to the one polling place. And so far more votes by a wide margin cast early and by mail. So they don't need to have 7 polling places in this tiny county where 10 or 15 or maybe 80 people are showing up on election day to vote. They've offered a ton more ways to make it accessible. And the people in Lincoln County are saying, we'll give people transportation if they need to ride to the polls on election day.
Yeah, I think, this is a controversial issue. And Georgia, parts of the Voting Rights Act were set aside by the Supreme Court ruling, one of which being pre-clearance. And in the old pre-clearance days, this move would have had to have been approved by the Justice Department before it's implemented. However, that does not prevent people who feel that this is wrong from bringing suit. And I think, you can play games with these things. So I think we can't overlook that. It is possible to make it easier for certain people to vote and harder for other people to vote by where you place this single precinct. So I think, that should be looked at, and that's why we have a state board of elections. And that's why, and I guess it should also be pointed out, this is a local decision by the local board of elections. This is not, something that was coming down from Brad Raffensperger or Brian Kemp or anybody of that. That's a local decision being made. So I think, we'll have to see. I think one seems a little extreme because I don't think we're going to have the same numbers of people voting absentee in future elections as we had during the pandemic. So I think but again, that's their decision. They're the ones who are supposed to be taking all that into account. But I think if this is a something that advantages certain voters and disadvantages other voters, well, then there's a remedy for that, and that's a lawsuit. And so I think that may happen.
Yeah, but I question the Scott's points aside, and Scott, I'm not really disputing what you're saying. This is a bad look. Yeah, and granted, this is Scott's right. And Buzz, you're right. This probably came from this was a local decision. This is not a dictate from Governor Kemp's office or the Georgia Republican Party.
No.
But it is a bad look, especially given the debate going on currently in Congress.
Yeah.
And this, I mean, I don't know that this came up today during the debate, but this sounds like something that would have been brought up.
We should point out that, I mean, in my home county of Gwinnett, we've gone, I may have the numbers a little bit wrong, but as early voting has become more popular in recent years, the number of precincts in Gwinnett County has shrunk. And so you go from something like 175 election day precincts down to 155 over the period of 6, 7, 10 years or so, as early voting becomes more popular. So it makes sense. It's not automatically, again, this kind of gets back to Yuval Levin's point. The people are undermining the faith in the elections. It's not an automatic thing that this is that the sole purpose of doing this is to try to screw the voters of color. There are reasons to have fewer precincts. Going from 7 to 1, if I lived down there, I'd probably scratch my head and say that seems a bit extreme. But we'll see. And there are still remedies. The idea that unless the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed, there is no remedies. There are remedies. The Voting Rights Act still, except for pre-clearance and a couple other things, is still in effect. And you cannot, Georgia cannot move polling places for the sole purpose of disadvantaging minority voters. So if that's happened, then there's a remedy.
All right, so I'm going to move on to another thing here, and this is going to take me a quick second and to get this video queued up. But this was one of our, I think this was Buzz or Scott's suggestion. I don't remember who.
It was a joint. So yeah, we're inflicting this upon you, so you can blame me and Scott.
Hopefully the audio works well, but this is an ad from Kandiss Taylor, who is a candidate for governor, I believe.
Yes.
And this is the first time I'm seeing this. I didn't have a chance to look at it.
You didn't? Oh my gosh!
World premiere.
So
enjoy this
live reaction, right, Sean?
The governor's race in Georgia has 4 establishment politicians, and then there's Kandiss Taylor.
And I'm one of you. And God made me a fighter. You sold us out to China. You hijacked our elections. And then there's you. You didn't fight for your own seat that you won. What were you doing? Playing golf or trading stock? Oh, and the Democrat plant, who has been accused of sexual assault over and over. Now, I'm done with the good old boys. And it's gonna get personal. Stacy, it's you and me. Let's let the people choose in a fight that's not rigged.
Kandiss Taylor, the one we've been waiting for.
Oh my God, that is delicious.
God bless America. What a time to be alive. Come on.
Anybody can run for office. Anybody can run for office. I just love our country. Good. I love Georgia. I love Georgia politics. I mean, this is, yes.
So I sent this to Scott, and he messaged me back and said he was walking down the stairs as he's watching it. He had to stop and sit down so that he didn't literally fall down the stairs laughing.
Oh my God. Could you guys see my reaction as it was playing?
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's so awesome. Listen, she has no shot.
If South Park made an ad, I can see Cartman playing the role of Kandiss Taylor.
But hey, look, I'm a guy who got, in one of my ads, I got hit in the face with a Pokeball. Okay, so I love weird, quirky ads. But here's the complaint I have about this one. she takes herself too daggum seriously. If you're going to try to do something like that, you've got to be, if you're going to pull it off, you got to be self-deprecating. And she's not. She literally, I mean, as I watch that ad, she's thinking she is on her way, and she's, just by hitting the bag, she's dispensed with the three other Republicans, and it's the only people left standing are her and Stacey, and it's all over.
Like,
so, I mean, that's just.
So here's the thing, right? You sold us out to China, and you did something to our elections. Was she talking about David Perdue shipping jobs overseas? Was that what she was talking, or was she talking about the unfounded claims that Hugo Chavez and China were involved in our elections?
Look, she's all in with. I mean, she's beyond the stop the steal. She's a disciple of the My Pillow guy on the election stuff. So this is yeah.
Okay, so that answers a little bit of that question. But the last question I had was, how she was completely right about Vernon Jones, right?
Yes.
I mean,
look, if you read Debbie Dooley's newsletters, Debbie's almost as furious with Kandiss Taylor as she goes after Kandiss Taylor more than she goes after Brian Kemp.
Well, apparently after this ad, we might get a special edition newsletter in our inbox because this is look, Kandiss Taylor, Mrs. Taylor, Dr. Taylor. I don't know if you have an official title. I don't know you personally. I thought your ad was hilarious. I don't know if you meant it to be, but it made me laugh and therefore it gave me joy. And for that, I am grateful.
Her official title is unsuccessful candidate for governor.
Yes.
But it gave me joy. And hopefully our audience, and we gave you a whole segment because of the ad. So take the free publicity and run with it, girl. I mean, geez, good luck to you. Wow. Well done. I'm just, yes, more of that, please. More. I need it in my life.
And next time, contact the creators of South Park. They can they can come up with it's remember the episode about the Christian band they did? It was Faith Plus One. It's like I want to see Man Bear Pig in your next campaign ad. Otherwise, it didn't happen. On the talk, continuing on the trend of talking about elections before we move on to some state legislative stuff, the race for lieutenant governor is certainly an interesting one with political messaging and other election year nonsense that usually comes along with it. I'm seeing Burt Jones signs out in my neck of the woods, which makes me sad. But
well, you're a libertarian. Who did was it Ryan Graham is your guy?
Look, Ryan, who's been a guest on this podcast. Ryan's. Yeah. I'm voting for Ryan.
Right.
If certain things happen. I'll vote.
That's a ringing endorsement of Ryan Graham.
No, it more has to do with where am I going to be registered to vote at the time.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Don't break the law to vote for Ryan Graham.
You don't want to be trying that nonsense these days. I'll tell you, you'll make headlines.
Yeah, Ryan Graham has my vote. Assuming I'm a registered voter in the state of Georgia. But no. So the lieutenant governor's race obviously is one that's heating up. Jeff Duncan not running for re-election after serving only one term. I haven't taken a look at the LG race fundraising numbers, but with reporting happening recently, I'm curious where these guys are right now.
Big numbers, Jason. Big numbers. We'll start with Butch Miller. Butch had raised $2 million last year. And he says he has 3.35 million, according to an AJC article. 3.35 million is nothing to sniff at, but Burt Jones raised 1.75 million from donors, and then he loaned himself another 2 million of his own cash. So he's sitting at 3.75 million for the latest reporting period. So we're talking almost $7 million between the two of them. I expect there to be a lot of blood on the floor before the legislative session is over. And just for the record, I haven't decided who I'm voting for in that. They each have an opportunity to earn my vote. And it's definitely not going to be for Ryan Graham. Sorry, Ryan.
There is a third candidate in Jeannie Seaver, an activist from the Savannah area, but I mean, God bless her.
Does she have any Kandiss Taylor like videos that we can?
No, not that I'm aware of. But
the cycle is young.
The cycle is young, and look, she's a longtime activist. Nice person and everything. But it's hard. It's hard to see her getting much traction in this. This race is going to be Burt Jones versus Butch Miller.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be interesting to see how that race shapes up, as well as some of these other races that are happening. But I don't know between these candidates who because they all seem to be like, as Scott has noted, I am a libertarian, both small L and big L. But I usually do vote in Republican primaries, and I am thinking, like, which one of these clowns do I want to vote for? And I'm not specifically talking. I say that about every office, no matter who's running, not specifically this race. I'm not calling anyone a clown in particular, mostly. But
you were thinking of that song, right? Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. I'm stuck in the middle of you.
So. Yeah, that's true. But no, it's it's just like thinking about my primary. But maybe this year's the first year I don't vote in a Republican primary. I don't vote in the primary at all. I don't know. But I'm thinking like some of these races, it's like David Perdue, Brian Kemp. If I vote in the Republican primary, which one of these clowns do I want to vote for? And no, I don't want to vote for Kandiss Taylor.
I mean, after that,
Vernon's still there, so you got 4 options.
Got a hard pass on that one, though. Thank you. But no, I mean, who do you guys see jockeying ahead? And granted, I know you say you don't.
Well, look, this will be a bellwether litmus test for the Trump endorsement, because Trump has endorsed Burt Jones. Burt was out with his first commercial, and since it's you run a mill commercial, we're not going to play it here tonight. But just suffice to say, he does hit the fact that he was endorsed by Donald Trump quite a bit in this first 30-second ad, which is supposedly running statewide according to his campaign. And I think that's what he's going to be running on, is I'm a conservative and I'm endorsed by Trump. And we'll see whether or not that's going to matter. Apparently, it hasn't mattered for the fundraising numbers for Butch Miller that he's not the Trump guy, because he's out there raising a ton of money. Now, he is in leadership. He's a pro tem of the Senate and the legislature. And so I could see how that position would lend itself to a good fundraising haul to take that next step.
In my part of Georgia, I'm Gwinnett County. Hall County is right above me. Gainesville, there's a business community in Gainesville that is very used to supporting candidates and very used to seeing their candidates win. Nathan Deal, Doug Collins come to mind.
Casey Cagle.
Casey Cagle, yes, of course. And so, in their minds, they are willing, that crowd is very willing to open up the checkbooks. And I imagine if you scoured through Butch Miller's disclosure, you would see quite a bit of support from Gainesville and Hall County. And that crowd in the past has, helped fuel those candidates that we mentioned who went on to win. So I think that's another base of power that Butch is able to tap into and raise a lot of money. So this is going to be a very fascinating race, because it's kind of those, the clash of those two power bases, the MAGA world versus the Gainesville business community, and it's going to be very fascinating to watch that all play out.
Have we talked about Burt Jones and his concert yet?
We have not.
No. The Jason Aldean concert.
Yeah, Jason Aldean. Yeah, he's just another generic country artist to me. But
he wears his hat down real low. You can barely see his eyes.
He's no Misfits, right?
I'm wearing a Strung Out T-shirt right now, which is a punk band that I grew up.
I thought it was a drug usage reference myself.
The band name is a drug use reference, but I personally don't use. And because weed smells like rancid garbage. I'm sorry. Like it should be.
You don't have to apologize to me.
It should be legal, but it smells like a skunk's ass. That's all I'm saying.
Anyway. Look, this was quite a coup for Burt Jones to get a very popular country star from who hails from the state of Georgia, to come out and do a campaign event for him. I think the problem was, as I understand it, and Scott, maybe you can correct me here, but he had planned to do this. This event was supposed to take place before the legislative session. He sold tickets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, due to the rise of Omicron, they decided to postpone it. Thus, it would be during the legislative session when this happened. Folks started raising questions about that. And Burt has said, well, we've ran everything by the, essentially, the event is going to take place. There will be no money changing hands, allegedly. Therefore, it's okay. But it did. The article I read did point out that Aldean can't bring his band because that could constitute an in-kind contribution that would exceed the campaign contribution limits. So it's going to be Jason Aldean and a guitar and a mic, an amplifier. So
I am curious. I am curious because musicians, like any musician, when they play, they get a guarantee.
Yeah.
So he's a bigger art. I mean, I've heard of him. I've never listened to one of his songs.
It's a pretty big country name. That's for sure.
So I got to imagine his guarantee is pretty outrageous. So I mean, the guarantee alone would exceed campaign contribution limits. So because is that an in-kind contribution?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking back to. I guess the only thing I have to reference to it is years ago, Bob Barr and John Linder squared off in a congressional race. I was the county party chairman at that time, and Bob Barr brought in a litany of conservative all-stars, and for example, and we found out after the fact. For example, Charlton Heston came, the late Charlton Heston came, and Barr's campaign paid him $50,000. So it would not have been any sort of campaign donation because they were paying him for an appearance fee, which I suppose for Charlton Heston that might have been his normal appearance, maybe discounted a little bit because he liked Bob Barr or something. But yeah, that is interesting. I thought that was kind of weird that so I suppose that means that Aldean had agreed to appear at no charge to the campaign, which of course then is a benefit which cannot exceed. Is an in-kind contribution that cannot exceed the disclosure limits. So
the way around it, though, is just simply have him paid. They have $3.5 million in the bank. They can, whatever the difference is, they can augment it with cash.
Sure. And I'm not disputing that they're just paying him. But if they're not paying him, I am curious how you're getting around. Like what would be essentially an in-kind contribution?
Yeah, that occurs during the legislative session, which, to me, by the letter of the law, is not kosher. But
and I want to be clear, I'm not making an accusation here.
No.
It's just
none of us are.
I'm more curious than anything else. As someone who both booked bands and played in a band and still occasionally sees things about guarantees and all that stuff just from these.
But
ongoing interest I have in music.
But don't you know that somebody on Butch Miller's team will be there and will be watching everything that goes on like a hawk, and it wouldn't shock me if ethics complaint is filed after the event takes place, making some sort of allegations about this.
100%. I swear to God, I hope someone isn't looking up the things I just said and I wonder how they are doing that.
We're not trying to help or hurt anybody here. We're just three guys talking here, but it is very, it's unprecedented. I can't recall another campaign having anything like this happen.
We're just three dudes having a conversation.
Yeah. John Porter is now with Butch Miller's campaign. John Porter tweeted out this past week, questioning this. I guarantee you the Miller campaign's all over already. Oh, yeah. We're discussing it in an academic sense.
Yes.
They're going to be using a practical approach.
100%. Turning our attention to the state legislature, Governor Brian Kemp is pushing legislation that would save girls' sports. This has been one of those emerging cultural issues that it's been coming up frequently especially in recent weeks. And the way this is happening, you have people who are transitioning from one, or maybe they haven't transitioned, maybe they identify that way. I don't really know how it works. Mm-hmm. And they're competing in girls sports. So people who are biologically male or were biologically male, and they have since transitioned, who are competing in girl sports. This is a weird one. This is a weird one, because in this day and age and I make no judgments or anything like that. As Thomas Jefferson once said, it neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg. But if you're a coach or a parent of a girl athlete who was born a female and competes in girl sports, I can understand where people would be pissed off about this.
Yeah, I mean, this is something Philip Singleton, State House Rep from Coweta County, had brought last year. Mm-hmm. And my understanding is one of the governor's floor leaders will be carrying a piece of legislation this year regarding it. And it fits into that category that we sort of started talking about last week of, is this a problem in Georgia? No, it hasn't happened in Georgia, but they're being proactive about it because it is becoming more and more common throughout the country. We've seen the swim team news story hit the airwaves over the last week or two, where there is a transgendered male that has become female competing in women's sports at the collegiate level and blowing away the competition, who I think actually did get beat by another transgendered athlete a few days ago. So I mean, it is.
If I'm correct, a woman transitioning to be a man.
Yeah, I don't know all the details. So I just knew that he did get they, he, she. I'm sorry that the pronouns. I try to be as respectful as I can. I don't know what the preferred thing is. I could just tell you that
my pronouns are dude and y'all.
Yeah, mine too. I guess I don't know. But I try to be sensitive to that. But at the end of the day, it is a situation that they're trying to be proactive with, because there are parents in Georgia who are concerned that scholarship opportunities would be missed for their daughters, and that their daughters would be put at a competitive disadvantage for those opportunities. And so it's a really strange, like, social issue where you try to be sensitive to everybody. However, like, for feminists have fought for so long to have their opportunities, and for biological males to all of a sudden be put into their competitions and for them to have to compete and what some would say is an unequal playing field. I could see why feminists would be fired up about this as well and want to protect girls' sports.
Yeah. Buzz, you got anything you want to add?
Well, I just think, every sports community is grappling with this on how to handle this. And I think, athletes want to compete, right? And so I think they're trying to, set rules around this. Okay, if this is going to be allowed, how do we do this? And I think, the International Olympic Committee has set rules that have impacted various people who are trying to compete. So I think, it's going to take a while to sort out. And I think this, the time to deal with this, as Scott mentioned, is now, before there are specific individuals involved here, because then it becomes very personal, right. And that then emotions run high. So I think if you're going to deal with this now.
Now, I would agree, but at the same time, I would also say, as Scott pointed out, this has not been an issue in Georgia. Right. And it does seem like another one of those examples of messaging opportunities in an election year. This is something that
it is an election year.
Yeah. And it's easy to get people fired up about it, because the culture wars are an issue that Republicans think are a winner. And certainly there are some aspects of the culture wars that are winners for Republicans. I do think this is one of them.
Yeah.
And
it strikes people as fundamentally unfair, right? I mean, that's the heart of it, that well, I guess using the example of Connecticut, for example, there's a lawsuit going on brought by a couple of girls who were girls at birth, who were defeated by two young men who transitioned to women and started competing in women's sports. And that's a scholarship opportunity lost. The opportunity to go to the state championship was cut off because of this. And I think that seems to be the dividing line on this issue is this really fair or not?
Yeah, and regarding whether or not it's a problem here, I think proactive is better than reactive here for a whole host of reasons. But number one, I think Buzz hit the nail on the head, and I'll reiterate what he said. You know, if you put a name and a face to somebody as opposed to having it as a concept, it becomes a personal attack on that person.
Yeah.
And we have this debate now when it's not a problem, it's better. Because that person's no longer the individual focus of the effort.
Yeah, and look, I think it probably is worth saying we're all, Jason's a full bore libertarian. Scott and I are have libertarian leanings on various issues, and I have if somebody wants to live their life this way, God bless them. Knock yourself out. Do what you want to do. But these kinds of issues are going to come up, and we got to grapple with them. And I hope we can grapple with these thorny issues in a fair way and in an adult fashion without getting mean spirited about it.
Yeah, and moving on to another legislative issue, State Representative Brad Thomas has introduced a legislation to ban critical race theory or the teaching of critical race theory in Georgia schools. The bill is House Bill 888. This is another issue that it's a tricky one because I think we've talked about this before, where there are elements of CRT that I think we probably would all understand and maybe even agree with, but there are other elements of it that we're like, no, not so much.
Yeah.
And while I'm not aware of this specifically being an issue in Georgia, at the same time, I also understand that it's a lot like Common Core. It's not called Common Core, but it's still Common Core. So it could very well be being taught in Georgia, but not under the banner of critical race theory or whatever. Scott, you're the one who pointed this out to us. You want to take us?
Representative Thomas is currently my state rep. He will not be after redistricting, but he got involved very early in his first year in the legislature with the Cherokee County School Board, and there's been a lot of very heated Cherokee County School Board meetings. And every single one of them who are up for re-election later this year will have an opponent because there is a perception that they have allowed CRT to somehow penetrate their curriculum here. And so a couple of different aspects of the bill where Representative Thomas has tried to address. And one of them is forcing every school district in the state to publish on their website a transparency measure a couple times a year where they have listed their entire approved curriculum and ancillary or supporting materials, so that parents can have access to that. But here's the thing for me, and I think it's a fine line, because I don't want my child being indoctrinated. As a parent of school-age children, I don't want them coming out thinking that CRT is gospel truth, because there are parts of CRT that I think are abhorrent and are demonstrably false. And there are some of them that I would take into consideration, but I'm not going to adopt it as my governing philosophy, politically or otherwise. Mm-hmm. There are things that I learned in school that I learned about and without being indoctrinated. For example, communism. Nobody is going to accuse me of being a communist because I learned about it several times in my public school education in Volusia County, Florida. Right. I remember in 8th grade writing a paper about how communism sucks because one person does all the work and the rest of the people are freeloaders. And like this group project that I'm in, where I did all the work and my group members didn't pitch in at all, So that was an example of communism to me. And so you can't say that somebody teaching something is going to necessarily indoctrinate it. If they're trying to get rid of the indoctrination aspect, completely support that, right? But I don't, if my child were in a public school and they're not for reasons like this, my children are homeschooled, but if they were there, this is what I would be saying. I want my children to learn about as many things. My children will learn about CRT. They will learn about it. They will not be indoctrinated in it, but I want them to know about it so they can know how to think about it and address it. And whenever they should be confronted with something in their adulthood, they could deal with it from an educated point of view and not from something they learned off of Facebook. I want them to be truly educated about it, not in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Jason, you mentioned Common Core. I think this issue has become a lot like that, in that CRT has become, the phrase critical race theory has become a basket in which people are pouring into all sorts of things that they don't like about what may or may not be happening in their local public schools. And look, this has to be cast under the lens of what's been going on in the last 2 years. Parents are now, because of Zoom school, everybody being shut down, and parents are more aware of what's going on in their kids' classroom than they probably have ever been. And then on top of that, you have the rise of, you had the George Floyd incident and all of the summer of protests, and Ahmaud Arbery and all those things wrapped into that, where there's a group of people trying to push greater awareness on these issues, on systemic racism and things like that. All of this is kind of getting mixed into one. You have the rise of people like Ibram X. Kendi and the 1619 Project, which are attempting to change how we think about these issues. All of this is all kind of getting mixed into one. And so, again, we have these two extremes. We have these people who say, I don't want any of that taught. I don't want my child learning any of that stuff. Well, teachers rightly point out, how do you teach history without talking about many of these issues? And Scott's right. Where's that line between education and indoctrination? And I think that's what parents are I think, sensible parents who are looking at this, and I want my child to learn. I don't want them to be indoctrinated. And that's, I think, very tough to deal with in a piece of legislation. Now, the other side, the left is screaming that this is an attempt to try to whitewash American history and take us back to, the days of the lost cause type of teaching of American history. That's not the case. I have not heard anybody on the right talk that way. But, again, we have these two extremes trying to do things. And I think, I think it's going to be very tough to try to ban this thing, because you're banning an idea. And how do you ban an idea? Because then you can just change the terminology and teach the same thing. What we've really got to look for is, all right, what we need to have a conversation about in the education community is, how do we educate without indoctrinating? And there's probably indoctrination going on in places, because it's a fine line. It's hard to do. How do you teach about Nazi Germany without
creating Nazis?
without slamming Nazis. How do you teach about the antebellum South without talking about the evils of slavery? But then, I don't know. It's very complicated, and I don't know that we can fix it with a single piece of legislation.
No, and that's it's all good points, and I think, because here I am. I've talked about this with people in the past. Here I am, like I'm what the Libertarian Party of Georgia's convention was out in Douglasville, which is roughly the area where my mom grew up. My mom is from Villa Rica, Georgia. I have generations of ancestors buried in one particular cemetery out in Villa Rica, and I've seen this, one of my I don't remember how many greats they are, great grandparents, who have a plot where stones were placed, big stones were placed around their plot by their slaves.
Yeah.
And I say all this knowing what my ancestry. I don't really know much about my dad's side of the family, given my dad died when I was young, and I haven't had contact with his family in years. But my mom's side of the family I know a great deal about. And look, we had ancestors who fought for the Confederacy, several ancestors who fought for the Confederacy. Oddly enough, I have one ancestor who named the first and middle name of one of his children who lived in that area was William Sherman. Go figure.
Oh my.
Yeah,
wow. He must have been popular at parties back then.
Well, contrast that with the other ancestor I have whose first and middle name was Jefferson Davis.
Also very popular at parties back then.
And this is in the 1860s. Go figure. So I say all that to say, like, I recognize the the evils of slavery and my ancestors' own involvement in slavery, and it's not something I'm particularly proud of. I recognize that you guys remember the flag debate years and years and years ago. The flag that Georgia has now, people were upset about the Confederate battle flag being taken out of the state flag. People don't realize that this current state flag of Georgia is based on the first national Confederacy
the
flag.
Actual Confederate flag. Yes. But here's the thing, right? I think we've all touched on this. Go ahead.
Let me make my point. My point is the evils of slavery, the bad things in our history that have happened, not limited to slavery, the internment of the Japanese and German and Italian Americans and people, all those things, massacres of Native Americans, the Trail of Tears, all these things need to be taught, but it needs to be taught in balance.
Yeah. And in context. And I think,
And let me I don't think either of you are meaning in balance and in context as an attempt to whitewash it.
No,
it's just that this is history. History is good and bad.
Right? Exactly.
We have great things about the South. We have bad things about our history. That's the way it is.
Right. History has warts. I mean, we are an imperfect race of human beings. We're going to have warts, but you can learn about racism without becoming a racist. Right. You can learn about slavery without becoming pro-slavery. You can learn about communism or socialism without becoming a socialist or a communist. You can learn about CRT without adopting it as your mantra or your philosophy. Yeah. And that's the point. And so I think there needs to be a balance there. You're trying, don't try to indoctrinate the kids. But my children need to know that this is a concept out there that exists.
No, and just the last thing about context. I mean, one of the things that never gets talked about, we talk about the Declaration of Independence and Thomas Jefferson and the hypocrisy of Thomas Jefferson, who I can't remember the author's name, but wrote a book called The American Sphinx, which is, a great book. I read it years ago. Talking about how Jefferson was this mysterious character in American history that was, full of these contradictions in life. He talked about, this Enlightenment era, American founding father who owned slaves, despite the fact that he, in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, had an outright condemnation, not just of slave trade, which made its way into the Declaration of Independence, but of slavery itself. Yeah. And it's a paradox. And that's why I say, history, Scott, I'm glad you mentioned in context, because history does need to be taught in context. And I'm not justifying the actions of Thomas Jefferson or George Washington, or even saying that, Benjamin Rush and Benjamin Franklin were somehow better people because they co-founded or joined American abolition societies. Franklin had a slave in his younger years before he became an abolitionist. These folks, you cannot judge the past through a modern lens, right? Except to say that slavery was wrong, right? But yeah.
Well, this is the thing in our current culture, is that once somebody does one thing wrong, they want to say everything about them is invalid. That's right. There is nothing invalid about the Declaration of Independence, because Thomas Jefferson had conflicting personal behaviors that he engaged in. Yeah. That document still stands on its own, independent of what Thomas Jefferson did in his private life and the sins that he committed against other human beings. Right. That doesn't invalidate, that's what we're trying to do in our modern view of history. That's what I mean by in context, is at the time, it was the best they could do as a flawed race of humans. Yeah. And they did a pretty good job. And even though there were dark sins that they did commit.
Yeah. As I like to say, if you guys have ever seen 1776, the musical, it stars
I was just thinking that
William Daniel as John Adams, Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World, who points at during the debate on the Declaration of Independence, it says that documents encapsulates the American mind. That's not the exact quote, but he's talking about how that represents the American mind. And I would take that a step further and say that the Declaration of Independence is puts forward what America represents. Does it
aspirational, right?
Exactly. It's aspirational. It's an aspirational document. Does it mean that we always meet those aspirations? No, we have failed. And we're going to fail again. And that's something we have to keep in mind, is that America is a work in progress. It has always been a work in progress. you look back over the things, the abolition of slavery, the treatment of, the Native Americans, women's suffrage, which they finally got, all these different things that have civil rights, Jim Crow. We still have a lot of work to do on a lot of these things, but we are an evolution. We are evolving it as we go, and we're trying to correct these things as we go. We don't always meet these aspirations, but as long as we keep working towards them, that's something we all have to kind of be able to live with. And that's not making excuses about things that have happened in the past. It's not making that's not saying that there aren't things in CRT that I even agree with. There are things in CRT that I even agree with. That said, there is a fine line between teaching and lessons that are given about history and indoctrination.
Yeah.
So Buzz, I'm moving along to our next topic, because we have spent, and I am sure my progressive friends who are watching that are like, I hate you, Pi.
If they hate you, I wonder what they think of me.
We piss off both sides. That's Hey, we're doing okay.
Yeah.
So Buzz, David Ralston, the Speaker of the Georgia House of Representatives, was in Gwinnett County, or Gwenco, as I like to call it. I've never called it that, but I'm trying it on right now.
Well, we Gwinnetians kind of like Gwinnett County, but yes, Speaker Ralston was the guest of the the Gwinnett Chamber of Commerce, rather. They have a regular series they call On Topic, where it's a more political. They invite various leaders to come and talk about things. And of course, today it was Speaker Ralston's turn, and a short speech, not a really long speech, but essentially he was there to update the audience on what's going on in the legislature. He outlined his 3 goals, which I think he has expressed elsewhere, but the 3 things that he wants to see happen this session are crime. He wants to deal with crime, and he talked about that every citizen has a right to feel safe and be safe, and there'll be some legislation forthcoming to deal with that. And he also talked about the budget, which of course, those of us in the legislature remember that, who served in the House, Speaker Ralston would frequently remind us, the only thing we absolutely have to do is pass a budget. So your bill, you don't need to introduce dozens and dozens of bills. Of course, everybody introduced dozens and dozens of bills every year, but I think he pointed out how Governor Kemp has already mentioned this, and there's a desire among other Republicans to rebate taxpayers some of the money as extra money is flown in. But I think one interesting thing that I think that the Speaker has embraced, that he mentioned today, his one of his top 3 priorities is dealing with the issue of mental health. And it's been a problem in Georgia for a long time. And I think the Speaker didn't mention this, but there was an article in the AJC last week, or maybe the week before, talking about a spike, a very tragic spike in suicides of children under the age of 18. Was a record year for that in the state of Georgia in 2020, and that's terrible and heartbreaking. And so that's all revolving around mental health, and the Speaker wants to see some action taken on that. And he didn't outline any specific plans, but he said, related to mental health, other than there needs to be more funding with that. But I'm interested to see what legislation comes forth that the Speaker's talking about there, because it is an important issue. The pandemic, as we've all been locked up, there are a lot of people struggling, a lot of kids struggling, a lot of kids in school. I was meeting with some teachers a few weeks back. I participated in Gwinnett County Schools Principal for a Day. And I was in a room with a number of teachers and administrators at an elementary school around the corner from me. And I said, what's the number one thing that you're dealing with right now? Every single one of them said mental health, not just so their students, but they can see it in the families of these kids, that just a lot of folks struggling with that right now. And so I think it's interesting that the Speaker has brought this up, made it a priority of his, and we'll see what comes forward with that. But I think this is a very timely goal that the Speaker has.
I know we talked about mental health a little bit last week, and I opened up a little bit about my own mental health issues, the generalized anxiety disorder that I deal with on an almost daily basis. I actually tweeted something out today that I was having my first cup of coffee in ages, because coffee would basically trigger a panic attack. Like and part of this is because I drank like 2 pots of coffee a day, which is like, for those of you playing along at home, that's like 8 cups of coffee.
Might have been a tad too much.
Might have been a tad too much. And there were some days I would even do 3. So I probably did it to myself, but I've always been kind of high strung anyway. But I had but I had my first cup of coffee today. I'm proud to report that I did not have a panic attack. The medication I'm on to deal with the anxiety disorder is helping. Good. That said, I wanted to mention this because I was talking to a friend about this today. I went to this music festival in September called Furnace Fest out in Birmingham, and there was this organization there, and it's going to take me a second to find the name of the organization, that they were selling T-shirts that I thought it had a message that resonated with me. And
it's okay to not be okay.
Did I mention it last week?
You did.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. I could remember. Yeah. I wish I wore it today. The organization, and the reason I thought about it too, because I found the organization. It's called Hope for the Day. And they're based out of Chicago, and it's just very positive and uplifting. And there was actually a really cool hoodie that I saw in their store today that I'm gonna have to eventually get, because it spoke to me. It says, where did it go? And I've lost it. Damn. It's like where I lost it. So it was here earlier. Now I've lost it. Never mind. It's basically, it had profanity in it. I liked it.
It says, most profane things you do. So
it says F stigma. That's what it says. And okay. I think that's one of those things. Like, I think this mental health is something that we need to normalize, and people, because like there is not one of us who doesn't go through life with some sort of mental issue. And it's just something I really wish we were making it okay to talk about, and making it more normal for everyday folks.
I think if you run for office, you need some sort of mental health check. That's first and foremost. But I'm glad that the speaker was there in Gwinnett County. I just remember being chastised by his office for going to speak outside my district when I was in office. So hopefully the Gwinnett delegation had a chance to be seen and heard as well.
Well, it was funny. The speaker took some questions, and a Democratic representative in Gwinnett County popped up to ask a question, and he said, "You don't get to ask a question," but she did ask a question. He answered it. Was that
McLeod by chance?
No, it was not.
Oh, wow, okay. Because that sounds like Donna McLeod.
Representative Beth Moore.
Oh, okay.
But as you guys will appreciate this, as the question time was winding down, I jumped up to ask a question, and I asked the speaker, how as a loyal Bulldog fan, how happy was he, how excited was he to see the Bulldogs after 41 years finally win a championship? And he took note of my little slight there, and he expressed his joy and how happy he was, and he didn't realize until he got back to the hotel that he said he was excited to see that, or relieved to see that Stetson Bennett had shed a few tears, and that he knew he wasn't the only one who shed a few tears that night and that Georgia won. But then, of course, he took a shot at Georgia Tech and said they'll be back there in championship hunt well before any time that Georgia Tech ever is. So I guess I had it coming to me, but it was a fun little exchange there.
Yeah, I was about to say the most recent college football championship from the state of Georgia came from the University of Georgia, and it's been 32 years since Georgia Tech won a national championship. So you guys
31, but yeah.
Well, fair enough. But yeah, you guys, was it 1990 or 1991?
1990.
Okay. But you guys, you're in your drought, and I wish you doubly long as Georgia.
Well, we must note that there's only been a week that you've been able to do that, because before that, Well,
I'll also note that before we came on, I saw that Stetson Bennett is returning, but JT Daniels is transferring.
For his 12th year of eligibility? What the hell?
He'll be 25 at the start of next season.
I got to say, I mean, that surprises me. I mean, he can do whatever he wants to do, but I mean, how can it get any better for Stetson Bennett than it did this year? It's not. I mean, my guess is he wants to improve any draft standing he has, and coming back and playing a full season, being the starter. But he's going to have competition just like he did this year. I mean, sure.
Kirby
Smart is not committed to any one quarterback. He's proven this over and over again.
That's right. Yeah, and so we got Brock Vandegrift, Carson Beck. I don't know if Beck's going to transfer or not. And then there's another quarterback who's, I think we'll have 4 or 5 scholarship quarterbacks next year. So
there's another hotshot stud coming in. So I mean, I'm frankly surprised because look, the sponsorship opportunities are there for Stetson Bennett for the rest of his life in the state of Georgia.
He already did one. Did you see the video of him like giving or telling someone the cost of something? He said it'd be $33.18.
So he's got to have those things the rest of his life. Whether I don't know. I don't know. I mean, look, it's his life. He can live it. But if I were him, this is the time to go live your life, man. I mean, I don't know if he's a pro prospect. He might not be, but he won't be. He won't be next year because I don't.
I think it was.
I don't know. That's kind of puzzling to me. But.
I think it was Skip Bayless who said he would be a great backup quarterback. Not a starter, but a great backup quarterback. Someone you take in the 7th round, and he would have a career as that. I mean, you
make a lot of money doing that.
You make a lot of money doing that, but you could make you could probably make couple $100,000 a year just being a spokesman for a brand only in the state of Georgia.
Or a sports talk radio show doing radio commercials, or
worked out well. He's worked out well for Buck Bellew.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Exactly. He's not the talent that Herschel Walker was, but he's that legendary status. He's the guy who delivered Georgia the championship, just as Herschel
the underdog.
Did.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
He's got a great story and
sell his movie rights, man. I mean, good gracious, yeah.
He's got his story, and he could take it and run with it and cash it in and make a great living. But he's the fact that he's returning. I mean, he's an undersized quarterback. He's 5'11", I think.
Is he that short?
I think he is.
Huh.
I think so. But so he's undersized. He's Georgia's not going to have the same team it had this year. Next year, he's 5'11", 190.
Wow.
And I mean, granted, I hope Georgia
repeats, one of our chat participants,
Scott,
one of our chat participants says Gunnar Stockton is the name of the up and comer. Yeah,
that's right.
Right.
Yeah. Our last thing before we go, the constant threat of bad weather in Georgia. We are often the laughing stock of the nation. I say that with this huge asterisk, which I'm going to get to after I finish talking. Everybody remembers the ice storm a couple of years ago when 285 was basically completely shut down. People were stranded on the perimeter. And we had bad weather this past weekend. I didn't even drive back to the convention on Sunday because of the threat of bad weather. We are expecting potentially, I haven't seen an updated forecast, but Buzz, I saw your tweet this morning about the potential for bad weather. And then now to my asterisk, I-95 was shut down for 50 miles in Virginia from Kings Dominion to Quantico. I don't want to hear it.
Right.
So under the previous governor, who was a Democrat,
and Senator, there's another asterisk, but Senator Tim Kaine was stuck in that for 27 hours, and also it poured down rain like the 2 days before that, so it's not like they could pre-treat the roads. So right. I get it, I get why it happened. That said, Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, who's
Bob,
I do not. That job sucks, man.
Yes.
And like no matter who is president, that job sucks.
Yes.
She tweeted out, and I quote, "Growing up in the Northeast, I will never," and she didn't use a comma there. That's annoying. "Growing up in the Northeast, I will never understand the closing of stores and restaurants when there is barely an inch of snow on the ground yet." To hell with you.
Yeah.
Well, she has made a lot of out of touch comments, but for somebody from the Northeast to sit high and mighty over the entire southeastern region of the United States, who is not used to this type of weather and therefore doesn't have to invest in the gear and the equipment, the preparation that they have to up there, it just shows how out of touch she is. And frankly, it was a very elitist, even if it was tongue in cheek. And I'd give her the benefit of the doubt that maybe she wasn't being completely serious, but still, how elitist are you, you damn Yankee? Get the hell out of here. No. You and the horse you rode in on.
Buzz.
Yeah, it is. And, she said for less than an inch, I got 2 inches, 2 inches of snow here in Gwinnett County. Some areas got more, some areas got less. We didn't know. And Atlanta's always on the edge, right? We're always, it's either 35 degrees and rain, or we get snow and ice. And not even Yankees can drive in ice. Okay, just to point that out. But yeah, it was. I agree. It was an elitist statement. It was an out of touch statement. It was a ridiculous point. And Jason, you mentioned the one where Atlanta really got ripped was that incident you mentioned. I was in the legislature at the time. I think you probably were too, Scott.
Yep.
And what happened was we were all downtown for the legislative session. We didn't know when it was going to hit. They didn't. It was a forecast thing, and I'm not blaming the weather people, but the things changed all of a sudden. And so I don't care if New York City or whoever, the most glorious city in the Northeast, if you take 80% of the people who live and work or work in those areas who have to go out and dump them onto the roads immediately with a bunch of snow and ice falling, you're going to have problems. And that's what happened in Atlanta, and that's why we all got stuck. But yeah, it's ridiculous. It was a dumb statement, and she was suitably ratioed on Twitter for that.
Yeah, no, and it's just because like Buzz, we're you talk about Atlanta being the sort of like the line, like we're below I-20 and by like 6 miles, and it's we got nothing stuck. We got snow. I know Douglasville, where I was supposed to be, they got a couple inches. Yeah. But where I was at, we got nothing. We saw snow. Snow came down, but it didn't stick. I think the temperature here, the lowest it got during the day was when it was snowing was like 33 or 34.
Yeah. And the other dumb thing about her statement was this was a holiday weekend. It was a Sunday when a lot of places are, when there's less traffic anyway. And then it was the Martin Luther King holiday, which is a special holiday in the city of Atlanta. So it's not like, everything came to a grinding halt. It was a weekend already. So
but this administration doesn't like Georgia. Yeah. The Biden administration does not like Georgia.
We're supposed to have turned blue and delivered the presidency to him, and he keeps dumping on us.
They keep saying the quiet part out loud. They don't like us. They don't respect us. They don't think highly of us. They think we're garbage. They think we're trash. They're elitist. And that's the bottom line. I mean, they just don't like us.
No,
I'm okay with that because I don't like them either.
I have a good response to this. So there's this, if you guys follow It's a Southern Thing on YouTube or Facebook, So Matt Mitchell, who's one of the guys who
he's hilarious, by the way.
He is very funny. He actually posted this on like 3 hours later. So January 16th, he didn't post Jen Psaki's tweet, but he posted like a tweet of his. And he says, before any Yankees say something about how we overreact to an inch of snow, let me remind you of this. It is a screenshot from NBC Connecticut. That said, the headline is schools dismissed early amid record-breaking heat, and he's got a circle around the temperature and red arrow pointing up to it, 90 degrees.
Oh my gosh! Also known as June 2nd at noon in Georgia.
Yeah. Because I mean, walking around the hill. Because I used to love, so Freedom Works office was always both offices that we had while I worked there. One was in the Hall of the States building, which is sort of adjacent to the Capitol complex, the Senate side. The other one was 3 blocks behind Union Station, which is where they're currently located. So I would still walk up to the House side. Like, it's like not a short walk, and I'm going out there in July wearing, a dress shirt, a suit, and my coat's on. Aren't you hot? I'm like, I'm from the South, man. Like,
this is not hot.
This is not
hot.
To it, yeah. I was 14 years old catching double headers, in the middle of summer when it was like, in the summer of 1995, which was really hot.
Like 97 degrees and 98% humidity.
Yeah. Like the heat index was like 105. Like, yeah. I got this. I'm good. I'm good. Yeah. I appreciate your concern, but like it's, and I remember going to Boston for vacation. It was like it was like right after the recess in 2017, and we went up to Salem. We were talking to this Uber driver, and we asked him, like, so what is like snow? Like, what's the time period for snow? He's like, October to April. I was like,
wow,
that's
like stupid.
That's like 5 months.
Look, I know where the South is. This is why I live in it. I mean, that by itself, and the fact that it gets dark at like 2:30 in the afternoon up there is ridiculous.
That's why people keep moving here, right? I mean, it's to escape that stuff.
I mean, geez, there's no way I'd live in Michigan. There's no way I'd live north of New York. There's no way I'd live. Yeah, no, just not happening.
Scott, I don't think you could. I don't think you could do New York. I don't think you could do New York anyway, even if it wasn't even the weather didn't suck. You couldn't do New York.
I've been to New York many times, and I've enjoyed myself there.
I've been to New York 5 times. It makes me nervous.
Well, you suffer from general anxiety disorder. I do not. I'm perfectly fine in New York. I've enjoyed myself there every time I've gone, and yeah, whatever. I wouldn't want to live there for sure. Because of the weather, primarily.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have, because
we've done enough damage tonight. So
yeah, we have.
Scott's being weird, and I have to edit the hell out of this podcast.
Oh, Kandiss, call me. Let's be friends.
Goodbye, former candidate Kandiss Taylor. Y'all have a great one. We'll see you next week. Peace out.
Bye.